State in the battle for control of Congress, there's a lot to unpack after last night.
Joining us now live is Dr. Jacob Neiheisel, a professor with UB's Political Science Department. Professor, thank you so much for joining us this afternoon.
My pleasure. Thanks for having me.
So there were a lot of not so surprising results from last night, a lot of very, very close races. What are some of your biggest takeaways?
Oh, that's a great question. I think there are maybe some early takeaways to be had, but we're still going to have to dig into the data when everything comes in and really do some more analysis. But I think in terms of early takeaways, the one that stands out to me is candidate quality still matters. That was something that maybe was lost after 2016 and Trump, but a number of candidates, particularly I'm thinking Georgia, where you have a tight Senate race, where you have a candidate who's not very experienced going up against somebody who is, and it's a tight race. Whereas the governor's race in that very same state went the other direction. And so I think that that is one indication that candidate quality matters and who is on the ballot absolutely matters.
Speaking of some of that data, are you surprised that Governor-elect Kathy Hochul did not fare better in Western New York, though she did just about split that vote? And then likewise, Lee Zeldin didn't do as well downstate as some people were projecting the possibility of about a 30-point take in New York City.
Yeah, another great question. I'm not really sure I'm surprised by either one of those. We always knew that she was going to do extremely well in the city and that Western New York was going to be perhaps less favorable to her, even though she does have the hometown advantage. That's just how the demographic trends have been moving in recent years. So all in all, not a terribly surprising race, really across the ticket in New York.
We still, of course, need to see what happens in terms of who gets control of Congress, right? And many of what we saw last night and the results from what we're seeing will have an effect in the 2024 election. How do you think that will affect that?
So in terms of control of Congress, I do think that Republicans are on track to win the House, and that's enough to really gum up the works here. And so I don't think we should expect to see much in the way of policymaking happening over the next 2 years, and that will, of course, impinge upon the likely Senate candidate, or excuse me, presidential candidates that emerge and how that election is going to go. So yes, this is all lining up for the 2024 contest.
It was announced earlier this afternoon that the Senate race in Georgia will go to a runoff on December 6th. Is there any candidate, either side, because we have been through this runoff situation before in Georgia, is there any candidate that is favored, Democrat or Republican, when it comes to that runoff?
In that particular runoff, I don't think so. Normally, you would think of anything that is of lesser salience, right, that's less attention grabbing, would be an advantage for Republicans who tend to do better in lower turnout environments. That being said, Georgia's done this for a while. Georgians know how to turn out to vote, and they know how important this race is. So I don't see really any advantage being baked into the fact that we're going to have to do this again in just a little bit.
And with you being a professor at UB's Political Science Department, I'm curious what you're hearing from your students about this midterm.
I teach a large intro course, and so there are some who were probably surprised an election happened, but then there are a number who were, of course, intensely interested, and they had their own models of who was going to win control of the House and looking to see how accurate they were. So I think that there's certainly a cadre of younger folks who are very excited and interested in what's going on and the mechanics of what's going on.
You interact with youth, or at least younger voters. Do you think that they showed up last night, at least as it pertains to New York State?
So just looking at the early exits, and again, things are subject to change, I think that this is one of those elections where we can say, yeah, the youth vote may have mattered, at least in terms of the vote split. They were one of the demographics that broke hard for Democrats, and that might have been the difference in some key races.
All right, Dr. Neiheisel, that is all the time we have this afternoon. Thank you so much for sharing your insight with us.
My pleasure.